website footprinting with Netcraft. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to utilize Netcraft to essentially enumerate as much information as possible passively from a website. So, this will give us Netcraft essentially collates all information like the who-is information. It'll give you information regarding the SSL or TLS certificate on the site, what web technologies are being used on the site, the name servers, all that good stuff. So I'm going to be doing this on my Kali Linux VM because we're going to be accessing the internet, so you can follow along with this. We're going to be doing this on my website. Again, this is all passive, so it really doesn't make a difference to me because this information is already publicly available. So I'll just switch over to my Kali Linux VM.
So I'm back on my Kali Linux VM and I'm currently on the Netcraft website here. So Netcraft is a fairly simple service to understand. It is essentially used to gather information about a target domain. When you're talking about the domain itself, it gives you information regarding the registrar, the emails, the operating system or the web technologies that are running on the website, etc. So it's essentially collating all of the information we were able to obtain manually in the previous videos, which is really, really cool, which is again why I wanted to showcase this. So to essentially perform a check on a website, just click on Services and Internet Data Mining. At the bottom, you should be able to see a box here, an input box that allows you to check what a site is running. So it's going to use results from Netcraft's Internet Data Mining database to find out the technologies and the infrastructure of any site. So you can type in the address here. In my case, I've already run a check on hackersploit.org. So I'm just going to close that up here. So let's go through the results. So it's going to sort it out into various categories. We have background, network, SSL, TLS, and then of course it'll perform a few vulnerabilities with regards to SSL and TLS. It'll provide you with hosting history. Let's see, we have web trackers, the site technology, which is very, very important. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So as I said, the information that's important from the perspective of a penetration tester is going to be the network information, but we can take a look at the background first. So this will give you the site title, the site rank, the description, when this website was first seen, and the primary language, which again makes sense. It'll then provide you with information regarding the actual domain IP address. So you can see the name server is Cloudflare. The name server organization again is Cloudflare, which again makes sense. Now, if you had not performed the previous checks with with the whois lookups and the host commands, then this could tell you what domain registrar was used to register this particular domain. And then of course you have the IP address of the website. Now, of course, in this case, it's going through Cloudflare, which means that this is not really the IP address of the web server that is being protected by Cloudflare, which is really, really cool. And then of course it gives you the actual top level domain, which in this case is the org TLD, and then it'll tell you whether the site has any DNS security extensions enabled. For the IP address, it'll give you the IP delegation. So this is the primary IP, which, as we know from the previous videos, belongs to Cloudflare, as it again highlights here. So it'll tell you the name right over here of each of the IP blocks, and in specific this particular IP, which is owned by Cloudflare, and it does that for IPv6. You then have the SSL and TLS certificate information. This is very important because it can essentially provide you with information regarding when an SSL certificate expires. It'll also tell you who it was issued by. In this case, it is Cloudflare, and in this case it tells us that it expires on the 10th of June 2022, so 11 months 4 weeks 1 day. That's really weird because it actually, so this is valid from the 11th of June 2021 to this year on June the 10th. So there we are. That's the SSL TLS certificate information. One thing that's really important, as I said, is of course the validity period, and of course who has issued it, and of course the issuer country there. In this case, it's still valid, which makes sense. And then, of course, the certificate transparency. In this case, you can see that it provides you with information regarding that there. And then if this site is vulnerable to any SSL TLS related vulnerabilities, it'll tell you that right over here. So it's not vulnerable to SSL version 3 Poodle or the Poodle exploit, and it's not vulnerable to the actual Heartbleed exploit. So the site did not offer the Heartbleed TLS extension prior to the Heartbleed disclosure, and so was not exploitable. You can learn more about these vulnerabilities by clicking on these hyperlinked links here. You can also click on the SSL certificate chain, which will essentially give you information regarding the, as it says here, the actual certificate chain. Hosting history. This is very useful in sort of getting an idea as to what hosting providers were used to host this website. Now, as I said, in my case, this is a site that goes through Cloudflare, which means that information will be redacted. And then, of course, you have the sender policy framework here. And then, of course, we have web trackers. This is very important because it tells you what analytics systems or what trackers are currently active on the site. In this case, you can see that we have Google Analytics and WordPress Analytics enabled here. And we then have the site technology profiler, which tells you, what, in this case, the proxy server that's being used, which is Cloudflare. On the server side, what web technologies are running. We can see we have PHP, XML, SSL, and we know that PHP is enabled. On the client side, of course, we have JavaScript, that's pretty much it. We then have the client-side scripting frameworks, which is jQuery and Google hosted libraries for fonts. In this case, it's the Google API used to retrieve JavaScript libraries. And then the advertising networks, in this case, it's AdSense, and the blog, which tells us that it's running WordPress, which is really, really cool. And then, of course, under PHP application, it will tell you what application is running. So you can see that is running WordPress, and WordPress is a PHP application that runs on a LAMP stack, which again tells us as a fact that this website also utilizes a database. Now, whether this database is being run or being hosted on another server is a different question, but we know it's either going to be MySQL or MariaDB. We can see that RSS is also enabled, which is also very interesting. And then, of course, let's see the other important information here. There we are, HTML5. So you can see that in this case, HTML5 is indeed being used for mobile optimization. So the reason I wanted to cover Netcraft is because it sort of collates all of the information that we've been able to identify previously or in previous videos. And it gives you in a very simple, easy to consume, easy to understand format. So do take a look at Netcraft. As I said, you can perform a lookup on another site. So, I can perform another lookup on maybe a site that I own, like hackertube.net. And let's see, how this is different. So I'm just going to run the lookup here, and you'll actually see the differences between the two. They both go through a web application firewall. In the case of hackertube.net, it goes through an actual web application firewall. So we'll give this a couple of seconds and you'll see the differences. So in this case, you can see that the actual hosting company is GoDaddy, or the actual registrar is GoDaddy. It goes through the actual security firewall. So that's identifiable via the actual name server. The domain registrar is Namecheap. So we now know that this domain was registered with Namecheap. And then, of course, the reverse DNS lookup points towards the following cloud proxy security domain there. As for the IP delegation, you can see all of the IP address is owned by Securi, which makes sense. Apologies for that. And of course, you also have the SSL certificate information, which tells you when it's going to expire, and of course who it was issued by. In this case, it's issued by Starfield Technologies. And I'm looking for the actual, let's take a look at the actual technologies running on the actual site. So HTTP accelerator, we can see we have the security cloud proxy, Securi is essentially a combined web application firewall and a content delivery network provider. We can see on the client side is JavaScript, nothing regarding the actual server side. So, we haven't been able to identify that. But yeah, that is going to conclude the practical demonstration side of this video.